Well, thank you, and if you wouldn't mind continuing to yield.
Absolutely, Mr. Walczyk.
So my first question, actually, that segues very nicely into, you've got a couple different categories in this legislation for, you called it the severity of the assault. Am I right in reading that? So for a very severe assault, 20 days would be the maximum over a 60-day period. And then for some of the lesser assaults that you just outlined, for other acts, 3 consecutive days or 6 days over a 30-year period. Am I reading that right?
As you begin, yes, that's right.
So of
But
those,
they followed by placement in ROUs if necessary, or continuing of the use of that if the behavior of the inmate is warranted. So it doesn't set it in stone so that you can't do that. We give the department the ability to use it, but not to abuse it.
okay, what would the least egregious or least severe assault be? Can you give a practical example for what that would look like on the inside that would qualify an inmate for 20 days within the special housing unit?
So if we look at the definition which I read, so for instance, if you talk back, can get you in shoe, and it's the current possible. You may find that. And so I presume that if you talk back to a, hold up, I'm answering, you can let me answer. So if that were the offense, and you might be subjected to the 2-day process, you might be, if that were the offense. The more severe the offense, obviously, the longer periods would be used, as well as the alternatives if the determination was that the behavior was going to be repeated or was repeated.
Just because I represent a number of correctional facilities and corrections officers, just so that I understand it in plain terms, if you throw fecal matter at a corrections officer, would that qualify you for the 20 days under this piece of legislation?
Obviously.
If you punch a corrections officer, would that?
Obviously.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, on the bill.
On the bill.
So myth number 1. Solitary confinement looks like it did in The Count of Monte Cristo, an excellent movie, an excellent book. I highly suggest it, but we're not addressing a situation like that. Or if you favor V for Vendetta and remember Natalie Portman's shaved head in that cell, that's not what it looks like in a New York State correction facility. It is not a dark hole in the ground. I've toured these facilities, as have many of my colleagues. There is literature and library services, playing cards, books, tablets, headphones available, mental health assessments, a dedicated guard that is keeping watch over that facility, religious services, legal visits, phone calls, mail, medical services. The list goes on. Myth number 2. Strict minute-by-minute operating within our corrections facilities is what keeps chaos from order. That's not true. If you talk to a corrections officer, you realize that mutual respect that is earned between corrections officers and the inmates that they keep safe from each other every single day is what keeps riots from not happening, what keeps order behind the bars. It is those professionals that do that job, and it's not by processes that we set here. It's not by processes that the Department of Corrections sets. It's from the professionals on the ground earning that mutual respect. There are a lot of great COs in New York State. There's some bad ones. The bad ones quickly learn that lesson, that if they don't earn the respect of the inmates that they are keeping safe every single day, it's going to be an even more difficult job for them to do. So that's myth number 2. This piece of legislation is shifting that power dynamic. And when we look at the data, we know that inmate populations are drawing down, and we know the reasons why they've drawn down over time. But when you look at the data, 2020 was the most violent year on record that the Department of Corrections has seen. 1,050 assaults on staff within our correction facility. 1,200 assaults were inmate on inmate. That's pretty significant. And when you look over time, year after year, that's continued to go up. And there's a couple different ways to look at that number, right? You've got a higher concentration of more bad guys, because we've continually pushed out anybody that we can release in this system. We've refused through legislation to put a lot of folks that we would have been sending to corrections in the past into that system in the first place. So these are the bad guys. The general population, the dynamic there has shifted. Now here's what we're doing with this piece of legislation. So an egregious act, assaulting a corrections officer, right? Out for blood, maybe to kill a corrections officer. The maximum you get right now is 20 days for somebody who's already doing time. With a laundry list of services that you already get, that's not that hard time to do. And if you really want to assault that corrections officer again, guess what? You're going to have a great opportunity to do so in 21 days because they have to let you out of the SHU. And when you're out, this legislation says for the next 40 days, they can't even put you back in there. That's the shift in the power dynamic. Corrections officers need this as a tool to keep law and order, and not just for their own protection. Obviously, I'm very concerned about the corrections officers, but their job is not just to protect themselves and make sure that they can come home to their wives and family, but to make sure that the inmates are safe every single day. Read those numbers again. 1,200 assaults were inmate on inmate. The people you're looking to protect and care for, the corrections officers need these tools to keep them safe too. You keep trying harder, but the data shows us that the policies that are put forward here keep making the situation worse. So you have to, before you cast your vote on this, really think about what the impact is going to be and understand that power dynamic within our system. My colleague, the esteemed, distinguished, and well-respected Phil Palmisano outlined some excellent ideas. Drug dogs in every facility so that our inmates aren't getting high and a danger to each other and the COs. Drug dogs in each facility can not only monitor the mail, they can also monitor the visitors as they come in. And I mean, that's something that is easy, but that's not presented in this bill and hasn't been brought forward in this chamber, and I don't understand why. Training. How about a pay raise for COs? You have a problem with the job that they do? They've been waiting on a pay raise. Would love to see you get on board for that. Give the corrections officers the latitude to earn the respect. Give them the tools to do their job, and you're going to see the results change. You're going to see those inmate on inmate and those inmate on corrections officers' assaults come down. But you have to listen to the COs. They're the ones that are on the ground doing that tough job every day. These special housing units, they're reserved specifically for the bad guys, the worst of the worst, the ones that really need to be separated from the population on the inside. Passing this legislation, and if it's signed by the governor, is going to guarantee that those numbers continue to go up. More assaults will continue to happen. That blood is on our hands in this legislature if we're passing this legislation. And I think we really need to think long and hard before we cast our votes today. So, Mr. Speaker, I will be voting in the negative and encourage my colleagues to do the same.